Now we're getting, actually this is one of my favorite parts of it, which is speed. You know, one part of usability is not just how it looks, not AJAX refreshes, although AJAX is related to speed a little bit, but just getting basic things to be faster. One of those things was the dashboard, you know, which, you know, the dashboards in the old version, you know, is very nice to have, you know, on the homepage of the section tool, gives you tools immediately that you can use. But if you notice the load time on the dashboard, you know, it uses AJAX, but it initially loads each applet as empty, and then it uses a separate AJAX call to load every one. So if we look 1, 2, 3, you know, about 3 seconds, you know, maybe 4 depending. We didn't see everything, but you know, 4 seconds to get access to everything. You know, especially if you're just zooming and you're configuring. That's like a second. You know, if we refresh it, 1. Essentially, what we've done is we've added a 2-level rendering capability for the applets. When the dashboard is initially displayed, it just renders the content in line. In the event your applet actually pulls things in from another web server or something like that, certainly we still support the, well, it can't render immediately, we're going to reach out and, you know, reload from another source. But for native applets, you know, anything that's, you know, part of the LeapSeed installation itself, it's much faster. You know, it just makes it much easier to zoom through interfaces. You don't, you know, have your train of thought broken. And, you know, naturally, you know, if you continue to use the applets, you'll see that, you know, AJAX behaviors are still supported. You can still update the properties. It's just that initial rendering speed is just that much better. You know, old one. And new. One thing also with reporting, on the example I've configured, it's more like a 4x improvement, but you'll see it with greater when you report on greater numbers. Is improving the Excel reporting speed of LeapSeed. Right now, you know, we ship with a reporting module that lets you configure reports in list format. So, you know, if we do configured news feeds, I'm going to run this report. I synced up the records before the presentation. That was maybe about 3 seconds, maybe 4. You know, we could do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, about 3. And if we actually look at the report that was generated, yeah, we have to. This is a demo, so we don't have the Aspos license installed, but we will. For any commercial implementations, of course, you know, you get the registration for it. See, this was by the count. This was about 80. This was, let's see, we're doubling up rows. This is about 500 records. It's like the formatting lost the total count. But we have the sub counts working. So 85. Yeah, it's about each you have headers too. It's about 900. It's about 400 or so records, and you saw it took about 3 seconds to generate. So reporting on the identical information with the same template. If we do clippings last 3 days, 1, just very quick. This is all running on the same server, same SQL server, same amount of data. And I can tell you, I mean, if you're this is 500 records. If you're doing it on, say, 5,000 records, it's the difference between the report taking 30 seconds to run versus it taking 3 seconds to run. You know, it's just, you know, incredible performance improvement there. Just, you know, we took a second looked at all the optimization techniques we could throw at it, and you know, just makes it much faster. Sorry.
What was the one thing that sped it up so much?
There were 2 things. The question was, what was it that sped it up? There was 2 things. One, we used a search capability. In the Excel templating, there's a template for every single row. And so within each template, there were text labels that described where the positions you'd put the actual data in. And for each row, we always ran a search for every single result and said, okay, find where this placeholder is, now find where this placeholder is. What we did in memory was catch that information. So for every single time we processed a row, we already knew where to run the replacements. We didn't have to call Aspos' search capability for each one. And then we also, as far as knowing where to plug in the new row, that actually required a search through the main ASPOS page to find like the next insertion point, which just grew exponentially as the actual report grew longer. So by managing that through memory too, we killed the exponential problem and also improved just the core row replacement speed. So this came up with a couple projects where I think we had some reports that were in like the 50,000 possibilities, and we didn't want someone using the system wouldn't crash the system, but would certainly slow it down to have 20 users running inefficient reports with that much data. So we certainly were able to speed it up once we had put it in some of the larger data reporting scenarios. Certainly 5.0 it wasn't unusable, but it's just slow. It was just slower than what a good optimization was able to do for it. One other thing, and this is just a minor thing, but also you see it. This pops up in certain scenarios. Is for the results drill down for the subrecord drill downs on some of our interfaces. We made it more efficient so that queries that show information would only use I'm going to show it because it's easier to show. So we have the clippings thing configured. If we look at the database behind it, if we go into the configuration, say go to the MSDN blog, you see there's 197 records, and there's 2 fields that are slated to be displayed. And this is, by no means really slow, but you can kind of feel it takes about a second per refresh. Actually, doesn't look that bad, but let's say it certainly gets worse if you say 5,000 results. But we can still look at the difference if we look at the new processing code for subgrids. So we go to MSDN. And you can see it's like almost instantaneous. Versus, so it probably feels like a glasses exam if you wear glasses, but 1, 2. It's just, and if you have like 5, what's happening, why this is an interesting case is our RSS tool, these news items contain large amounts of text in the description field. And the previous version, version 5.0, was just doing a select star to grab all the fields, regardless of which ones were being displayed. So in the new grids, we're more selective of which fields we actually include when we're pulling from the database. And so this new one really only pulls in the date and title. And so, it's leaving out about 5K per row. And, that just makes the interface, much faster. Again, on the you get to the point where there's 2,000 versus 200, and you really see like 7 seconds versus 2. So now we're getting into just a couple other things. This is just the new visual design that ships with LeapSeed. Of course, it's worth noting this enhancement works on Chrome, Safari, Firefox. Microsoft is catching up. But all these gradients here are actually images. And that does mean that, see if we can catch it trying to reload them all. And maybe you see a quick flash where it's, replacing them. It's actually, Chrome's pretty quick. But essentially each image, it takes a little bit of time to load. They're, the certain file size. With LeapSeed 6, all of these gradients are actually HTML5 derived. It's in the style sheet, so you can actually change the look of it without changing the actual. You don't have to create new images. These once the style sheet's loaded, it's just much quicker. The interfaces can just use them. If you actually want to change how the gradient looks, that's also in the style sheet. If we look at it in the configuration, let's say style sheet. And find, our tabs now use the gradient, so essentially we set a background color because most of our gradients end solid. How style sheets work is you can have the same property repeat itself, and the one the browser can latch onto is the one it'll wind up using. So we have the Internet Explorer friendly one. When we actually configured the interface, we actually used Chrome to actually render the gradients, and we screenshotted them and then created the graphics for IE because we certainly want the base platform to look the same between platforms, even though it'll load faster in Chrome and Firefox. WebKit and Mozilla, they have somewhat different HTML5 specifications for how you define gradients. But essentially, for our tabbing, for our highlighting, that's now all done with HTML5. And if you have a supporting browser, it just loads that much faster. These gradients here, the highlighting you see, that's all done with HTML5. So a few less images to load. Certainly on a mobile device like the iPad, where it takes time to render things. If you're on a 3G network, if you can reduce the images you're loading, that's always fantastic.